This brief discussion today is going to be looking at the Sea-Dweller 43. The reference to this model is the 126600, and most of us know it colloquially as the Sea-Dweller 43. It was a model that was released a few years ago and has become a huge favorite in the community. Many believe it to be the ultimate sports diver from the Rolex family, and there are many good reasons why. I made a video a few months ago looking at the importance of this reference, and in the video looks through the development of the entire line of the Sea-Dweller, how it changed over the years until its current model. When this watch was launched, there were a few subjects of debate. We know that the Sea-Dweller has always been 40mm in size. That was an element that made this watch really appealing to the Rolex buyer. Kept the standard size but had some substance behind its shape. One of the underlying features that made this watch so exciting was its under-the-radar profile. Where most would expect it to just be a Submariner, you know that it is a watch that could go virtually 3 times the depth of a standard watch, but still look as sleek and elegant as the standard model in the family. So there was a lot of debate around the 43mm size. Many people said it was Rolex's way of moving into a new generation. That was the underlying argument. The inclusion of a red line of text was quite interesting, but the real element that made people quite angry was the introduction of a Cyclops lens onto the crystal. Most of us know the history as to why the Sea-Dweller never received a Cyclops lens back in the day. It was simply because the crystals on the original models were domed. Since they had to go to greater depths and withstand greater pressures, a domed crystal could take a lot more force than your standard flat crystal. That, combined with a helium release valve, allowed for the watch to be extremely water resistant. Then over the years, as the watch developed, we started seeing how the crystal remained flat, but still no Cyclops was used on it. And just that feature alone is something that really appealed to a lot of people. Surprise, surprise, many don't appreciate a Cyclops lens on a watch. It is a point of failure if you are using this watch heavily. The crystal can be chipped, it can be damaged, and it also can be quite visually jarring if you want to read the watch in its natural habitat, underwater, for example. So many were quite frustrated with the idea that this watch was now getting back into the camp of the generic Submariners and every other model in the family that were using Cyclops lenses as one of their characteristics. The watch lost a lot of that vintage charm that people loved about the original references. And to make up for that, to the enthusiasts and those who remember the history of the Sea-Dweller, they added a line of red text. If I'm not mistaken, this watch was also released as an anniversary watch at the time. But many people have been thinking about this watch without a Cyclops lens. Some say that they would buy the watch if it didn't have one. And the story has been circulating a few times, but it seems to have gone unnoticed by a lot of people. And that brings up the subject of this discussion today. Is a secret that Rolex doesn't exactly want you to know, and it has to do with the inclusion of a Cyclops lens on this particular model. A few people have been scouring the internet over the years trying to find examples of this watch without a Cyclops, and there was an example that appeared on a forum. The watch looks quite peculiar when you first see it without the lens, and that is for one simple reason. Rolex's justification behind the idea of a Cyclops lens on this model was simply because they now have the technology to use the correct glues, allowing this lens to withstand the pressure and depths required. That's excellent marketing. The reality is that a Cyclops lens was used simply because the caliber of movement does not fit the 43mm watch. And that is clearly evident when you see the date window, how it is placed, relative to the plots around the dial. The diameter of the movement simply couldn't accommodate the full size of the watch itself. I just find it entertaining that this was a revolutionary idea to use this special glue that could withstand the depths, but in fact it was just a method to hide this quite obvious flaw in their dial design. Saying that though, the bonus of having the Cyclops positioned where it is allows for the window to be seen a lot easier. There isn't much marring on the dial. So you could look at this both ways. You could say that the spacing and proportions are wrong when you take the crystal off, but when the watch is actually fitted with a crystal, you can see that it doesn't get in the way of the other aesthetics on the watch. But when we look at the earlier generation of 40mm references, We can see just how obvious the change was, and the addition of a Cyclops was actually an afterthought. This by no means detracts from the watch's build quality, from its purpose, its styling. But I find it quite entertaining that no one has really spoken about it or noticed this small, very minor flaw. It begs the question, maybe we will see a scaled up movement one day that keeps the date window fully intact with the rest of the dial, like what we are accustomed to seeing with most models in the line. So this adds a little bit more trivia to the history of the Sea-Dweller 43. And I think it's worth repeating again that the use of a Cyclops on this dial in particular is quite effective, since it doesn't get in the way of the minute track, for example. Because the date window is pushed outwards, the Cyclops can fill the space neatly. But I hope you enjoyed that little excerpt. I found it quite funny when I read about it a few months ago. And here's to questioning what we will see released from Rolex this year. Let's hope it's something good. I just find it quite entertaining that it was spoken about as this revolutionary new glue that they were... I just find it entertaining that this was a revolutionary idea to use this special glue that